What's up, everyone? At the patron's behest, next up we have Hitmontop, unquestionably the coolest of the Hitmon trio. Though it's not based on a real fighter like Lee and Chan, its origin comes from the Afro-Brazilian martial art capoeira and a spinning top. The two go hand in hand. For Tyrogue to evolve into Hitmontop at level 20, its attack and defense must be equal, which references how a top must be in equilibrium to remain upright. Hitmontop is a Pokemon trivia nerd's dream, but today we're examining if it was the subject of similar yearning in the competitive scene. So we ask, how good was Hitmontop actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Hitmontop was sadly not good in its debut generation. It had no niche to speak of in OU. Offensively, it was entirely outclassed by Machamp, who could feasibly break through Zapdos, Skarmory, Ghosts, and Waters, unlike Hitmontop, which was blanked by them forever. And defensively, it didn't counter anything besides Tyranitar. Its lack of recovery and a normal resist meant it was definitely not a Snorlax check, especially with its strongest fighting stab, high jump kick, not even 2-hit KOing. Countering Tyranitar was A, not highly in demand, and Tyranitar wasn't the biggest offensive threat. B, not likely to matter when Tyranitar's main job is pursuit trapping and acting as a check to other Pokemon. And C, not useful when Hitmontop couldn't do anything of note to the rest of Tyranitar's team, nor did it counter anything else at all. Hitmontop had Rapid Spin, but it was terrible against Gengar and Mischievous, and there are better Pokemon with Rapid Spin that actually checked large portions of the metagame, those being Starmie, Fortress, Cloyster, and Golem. Even niche spinners like Tentacruel and Donphan would be better choices. Unfortunately, Hitmontop wasn't good in UU either. It got completely rolled over by the top threats of the metagame. It couldn't switch into much to begin with, and once it eventually did get in, it would quickly be stopped from dealing any notable damage. Nidoqueen, Hypno, Quillfish, and the Slow Twins completely stonewalled it. Dodrio turned it into opportunities for KOs, and depending on Hitmontop's choice of Hidden Power, Rock, or Ghost, either Scyther or Haunter would beat it, with neither being Pokemon you wanted to be taken advantage of by. As such, it dropped to NU. There, it finally had a niche. Countering Sudowoodo was notable, and with the lower power level, it could also take several neutral stab attacks from the likes of Dugtrio, Lickitung, and Dugong, while threatening decent hits in return. It did have some issues though. The most dangerous Pokemon in the NU metagame was Mr. Mime, which switched in and scared Hitmontop out hard, as did Fearow and Pidgeot, two other top tier Pokemon. Its other issue was competition with its fellow Hitmon trio member Hitmonchan, which was stronger and faster, but had trouble getting on the field with its mediocre physical bulk. Regardless, Hitmontop was a fine Pokemon on both ends of the offensive-defensive spectrum, and was an especially fierce cleanup force in the late game. Overall, Hitmontop was a solid member of the GSC NU metagame. Gen 3 gave Hitmontop Intimidate, one of the best abilities in the game, but it still couldn't quite crack it in OU. On paper, it is the best Tyranitar counter in the tier, weakening its massive attack stat while being neutral or resistant to anything Tyranitar wants to throw out. However, in practice, this did not work, because while yes, Hitmontop could take any hit from Tyranitar, thanks to Sandstorm nullifying leftovers and a lack of a recovery move, it couldn't do it too many times. And that wasn't good when Tyranitar was going to be switching in and firing off attacks multiple times throughout a battle. Hitmontop would get worn down quite quickly, especially if paired with spikes, since those made switching in sting even if the only attack it took was an intimidated rock slide. And Hitmontop couldn't alleviate this issue with Rapid Spin, because it couldn't spin at all against the Skarmory Gengar duo, or even just Skarmory. Alongside its inability to counter anything else or dish out any damage on its own, it's easy to see why Hitmontop wasn't used in OU. On a purely historical note, Hitmontop had some legitimate OU notoriety in the net battle era, when substitute Tyranitar variants were at their peak, dominating the metagame. People searched for ways to counter them, and Top was one of the best, possessing a very unique attribute in its signature move Triple Kick, which would cut right through the sub and stop the focus punch from going off while damaging Tyranitar heavily. However, even that was niche, as that Tyranitar was still often paired with the Skarmory that would dominate Hitmontop. Anyway, Top found itself in Advanced UU. There, it was quite a solid Pokemon. With Intimidate, it was one of the best checks to the tier's strongest Pokemon, Kangaskhan, and could spin away spikes quite well. The tier's premier spiker, Omastar, didn't want to switch into it, and the occasional Mischievous had to be very careful around Hidden Power Ghost. Psychic and Flying types were aplenty in the metagame, and they held Hitmontop back from dishing out too much damage. As such, it wasn't too notable as an offensive threat, but offense was more Hitmonlee's game. Hitmontop was more suited to defense. Plus, unlike many popular defensive Pokemon, it wasn't an entirely passive blob, since it actually immediately threatened the Pokemon Pokemon it switched into. The defensive utility Hitmontop provided against pillars of the metagame like Kangaskhan and Spikes, as well as other notable threats like Aggron, Kabutops, and Granbull, meant it was an excellent choice for bulkier, balanced, and defensive teams. Anyone who wanted to succeed with these Pokemon in advanced UU had to keep in mind Top's defensive prowess and ability to stop them. Generation 4 gave Hitmontop an excellent new ability in Technician, boosting its Fake Out, Mach Punch, and newly gained Bullet Punch to 60 base power, while it could round the set out with either a fierce new Fighting Stab in close combat or with the new 80 base power Sucker Punch, for yet another powerful priority move that ransacked its nemesis, being Ghosts and Psychics. This set was known as Technotop, which in theory employed its plethora of priority to pick off weakened defensive Pokemon. However, it wasn't good enough for OU. It couldn't switch into anything besides Tyranitar on offense and couldn't dish out too much damage against even frailer offensive teams, to say nothing of its utter uselessness against anything remotely bulky. It was just outclassed incredibly hard by Infernape and Lucario, and thus it dropped to UU again. There, the power level was such that the Technotop set could both switch into a hit or two from something like a dark move from Absol or Houndoom and actually have its priority attack leave a mark on the frailer offensive Pokemon in the metagame like Scyther, Blaziken, Tauros, and Mesprit. This made it a great choice on frailer offensive teams that couldn't afford to sacrifice power for the ability to safely counter threats. Hitmontop provided a safety net against them. This was especially useful as a weapon against Rain, which frail offense abhorred more than anything else. Not only did Hitmontop hit the Rain abusers quite hard, Fake Out also burned Rain turns. But unfortunately, Technotop wasn't good against defensive teams, as they packed tough to break hard counters such as Weezing, Spiritomb, and Venusaur. However, another variant of Hitmontop was actually an integral part of these defensive teams, with Intimidate, Rapid Spin to remove the omnipresent Stealth Rock, Foresight allowing it to spin even against Ghosts, and the ability to safely counter dangerous conventional stall breakers like Absol and Rhyperior. Hitmontop packed a ton of incredibly useful utility those stall teams wanted into one slot. Its lack of a recovery was no longer a problem, as it could run rest and be immediately woken up by a Heal Bell teammate. Getting rid of rocks was generally useful in making defense harder to break, but was especially great for facilitating Pokemon like Articuno that otherwise wouldn't be viable, especially with Foresight nigh guaranteeing the spin. Getting rid of Spikes was also huge given how so many great teams, both offensive and defensive, were fueled by them. Foresight spin was such a pain for these Spike stacking teams that it eventually resulted in them running 2 Ghosts just to stop it. Overall, Hitmontop was a great Pokemon for both offensive and defensive teams and was a significant cog in the colorful DPP UU metagame machine. And we're not done with Gen 4 singles just yet though. DPP OU didn't stop evolving after Black and White came out, and many changes to the standard metagame were seen. One of these changes was the emergence of Hitmontop stall teams as a way of bringing out the best in Rest Talk Gyarados, which was an incredible physical wall, but required rapid spin support. Standard stall ran Fortress, which wasn't bad, but could sometimes struggle to spin successfully. And the Rotom appliances were incredibly bulky, with Rest Talk for longevity and Will-O-Wisp to cripple attempts to bring it down from Fortress's payback and Tyranitar's pursuit. Hitmontop could basically guarantee the spin, even if it meant taking a burn in the process. It'd stay healthy to spin again between its own rest, as well as aromatherapy and wish support from its teammates. Hitmontop also came with the amazing benefit of not letting the most common Stealth Rock user of the post-Dragons era, Heatran, switch in to pop rocks back up for free. This allowed Gyarados to consistently wall a ton of the metagame, especially the dangerous fighting types, not just Infernape and Lucario, but also Breloom and Machamp. Hitmontop also synergized with Gyarados beautifully. Thanks to their dual Intimidate, physical attackers could be stalled out just by the pair switching back and forth until the aggressor could be dealt with. This switching was of course possible because Hitmontop removed Stealth Rock. Hitmontop could also come in and weaken users of Stone Edges aimed at Gyarados from Tyranitar, Aerodactyl, and opposing Gyarados, as well as scouting Infernape and Lucario possibly running lure sets. As such, you will never see Hitmontop without Gyarados behind it. Hitmontop also enjoyed when Tyranitar began using Stealth Rock to deal with both Fortress Stall and Heatran offense, as Hitmontop spun on Tyranitar all day long. Hitmontop Stall didn't take the metagame by storm, but it firmly entrenched itself as a viable, tournament-worthy team style, respected by the best players. Hitmontop was a rather specific Pokemon whose role only worked on one style of team, but it was excellent at the role, and it entirely defined its own unique subset of stall within the DPP metagame. In VGC 2010, Kyogre's Water Spout was the metagame's dominant attack, made more dangerous by Choice Scarf boosting its otherwise average speed. Hitmontop came about as an answer as well as a partner to Kyogre, forming the famous Top Ogre core that defined the 2010 VGC season. With its powerful technician and Life Orb boosted Fake Out, it could safely weaken an opposing Kyogre's Water Spout, which of course had power based on how much HP it had. Fake Out could also nullify an opposing Pokemon for Top's partner Kyogre to safely launch its own Water Spout. It wasn't only useful on turn 1 though, as Hitmontop utterly destroyed Abomasnow, the format's main Kyogre answer, and its Mach Punches formed a hard-hitting duel with Ogre's Rain Assault, being especially useful against Dialga. Top adapted throughout the season, running Aerial Ace to destroy Toxicroak that otherwise walled the Top Ogre combo, while also hitting other Hitmontop incredibly hard. But by the time Worlds came around, Hitmontop had shifted from the bulk investment they had started the season with, seeing as they had no need to run speed investment if they were only running priority, to running max speed just to get the jump on opposing Hitmontop. The mirror match was just that common and that crucial. Top Ogre was everywhere at regionals across the globe, and the 2010 season wasn't too well documented, but there is the most important instance of Paul Hornack, aka Zero Ring or Makiri, winning the Seattle regional with it. His team was the one that kicked off the Top Ogre boom and shaped the metagame. Hitmontop also placed second at the San Mateo regionals used by the Lolliverse, first at the Arlington regionals used by Jay Giles, second at Birmingham UK used by Mrs. Blackbird, and first at Cologne, Germany used by Kadavra. However, the Top Ogre combo had been such a huge piece of the metagame for such a long time that on the biggest stage, the best players adapted to it in a major way, thus making it far worse than it had been the entire season. And as such, no player in the top 8 of Worlds had a Hitmontop on their team. However, Hitmontop had shown what it could do and firmly established itself as a VGC superstar in its banner year of 2010. Hitmontop had no place in Black and White OU's high-octane Weather Wars, so it quietly dropped to UU for the 3rd generation in a row. The metagame was a lot bulkier this time around, so the old Technotop wasn't as effective. Top was relegated solely to defense and spinning duties on stall teams, where it functioned basically the same as the previous generation, just with different surroundings. Sure, there were old faces like Rhyperior who it came in on to blow Stealth Rock away, but Hitmontop also now countered Pokemon like Stealth Rock Cobalion and Crocodile. It made for a formidable stall core with Umbreon and was crucial to anchoring Hail Salt teams, whose double Stealth Rock weakness of Abomasnow and Walrein made successful spinning necessary. Top also paired up with Quillfish for a nasty double Intimidate core, and in addition to the amazing physical stoppage, Quillfish laid down the spikes that choked the opposing team, while Hitmontop absolved its own teammates of hazard pressure. This was a ton of important utility in just 2 slots, which was especially important for stall teams, as they aimed to cover as much of the metagame defensively as possible. Overall, Hitmontop was a stall staple and little else. This meant it was always about as popular as stall was, which fluctuated alongside its viability through the generation. As for Hitmontop itself though, its niche was specific, but was one of the absolute best Pokemon in that niche. There was no Kyogre to support in Gen 5 VGC, but Hitmontop was still an excellent Pokemon on its own. This time around, Hitmontop took team support to a whole nother level. It used Intimidate as its ability to soften physical blows, it packed the new Wide Guard to defend against spread moves, and sometimes it even ran Helping Hand. Despite being more support oriented, it actually hit harder than it did before, even without having Technician Mach Punch. Close combat was far more powerful, especially when bolstered by Fighting Gem. All of these traits and more were highly appreciated by Top's new partner in crime, Volcarona. Volcarona's lower defense stat enjoyed physical attacks being weakened, its quadruple weakness to Rock Slide loved the Wide Guard block, its vicious stab spread Heat Wave adored the extra boost from Helping Hand, and Top's old standby Fake Out allowed Volcarona to safely set up Quiver Dance, fully priming it to destroy the opposing team. In return, Volcarona utterly crushed the Cresselia that gave Hitmontop trouble. This brutal combination, dubbed Top Moth, was one of the most prominent dangerous aspects of the 2012 metagame. Top was great on all sorts of teams though, from Good Stuffs to Trick Room to Weather Abuse, it was incredibly common. So we've limited its placements to top 8 of Worlds, and those placements are Guillermo Castilla Diaz reaching 7th, Sagen Park reaching 5th, Abel Martin Sands reaching 3rd, and Wolf Glick reaching 2nd. Then Hitmontop showed no signs of slowing down in 2013. It even started sliding in Feint on occasion to break Protect, which could potentially win games on the spot. Now its usage began to slow a little as Conkeldurr got more popular, but Hitmontop was still insanely popular. And if you want the full list of placements that we found for this VGC or for any of the future VGCs, then you can check out our list of sources in the description down below. But anyways, we've limited its placements to top 4 at Nationals and then top 8 of Worlds. These placements are: at the UK Nationals in the senior division, Henry S reached top 4 and Alex B was runner-up. At the German Nationals in the senior division, Luca P was runner-up and Mohsen B won it. At the Italian Nationals in the seniors division, Nicola G reached top 4, and at the Australian Nationals in the seniors division, an unknown Brent reached 2nd. At the Italian Nationals in the Masters division, Eloy H was the runner-up. At the UK Nationals in the Masters division, Lee P reached top 4 and Ben K won. Then in the Masters division, Enosh Shakar reached 6th. As you can see from the insane amount of high-level placements, Hitmontop was kind of a big deal in Gen 5 VGC. The fallout of the mega-ridden OU meant the fairy-infested UU was now also too much for Hitmontop, which dropped past UU for the first time since it debuted in GSC, finding itself in RU. There, its defensive Rapid Spin set was a decent part of the metagame. Rapid Spin was unique and potentially a tool for great advantage because unlike the newly buffed Defog that ran rampant throughout the metagame, it removed the opponent's hazards while maintaining its team's own. As always, Intimidate alongside its bulk and typing meant it could also stave off some notable metagame threats like Rhyperior, and it could spread Toxic fairly well against switches like Fletchunder and Meloetta. However, Hitmontop had issues staying alive throughout the game. Its lack of a recovery move had rarely looked worse, as now it regularly lost its leftovers. Knockoff had been buffed and was absolutely everywhere, including on dangerous Pokemon that Hitmontop was supposed to counter, most notably Drapion, Escavalier, and Kabutops. This meant that even though Spin preserved its team's own hazards, Hitmontop's predisposition towards getting worn down meant that a Defogger with recovery was often chosen over it. Removing one's own hazards was a reasonable price to pay in order to be able to remove the opponents multiple times, as Pelipper and Golbat were capable of thanks to Roost. However, the tier was rife with viable Wish Passers in Audino and Aromatisse, who could also heal Bell away a burn Hitmontop might have taken while spinning against Jellicent. Hitmontop was significantly more niche than before and didn't have that big of an impact on the metagame, but it was viable. Hitmontop took a huge hit in Gen 6 VGC. The fighting gem was gone, Megas, Talonflame, Aegislash, and Fairies were everywhere, and as such, it suffered a tremendous drop in usage. Fake Out and Intimidate were still good traits, and anything to slow Mega Kangaskhan down was decent, but being food for the Mega Charizards, Gengars, and Salamences of the meta was not a desirable trait. Quick Guard was decent to fend off Talonflame's dangerous Brave Birds, but Top was still a highly niche pick. It saw some usage, but nothing anywhere near its Gen 4 and 5 days. Its 2015 placements were Eloy Han reaching 4th at the Netherlands Regionals, James Tarbuck reaching 19th at the UK Nationals, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Christian Chenubrada reaching 29th at the German Nationals, 16th at the Italian Nationals, and 24th at Worlds. Then in 2016, the year of the restricted Pokemon, Hitmontop was niche once again throughout the entire season until Worlds, where players realized how incredibly effective it could be, with Fake Out, Wide Guard, Helping Hand, and Feint being amazing tools to facilitate easy setup for and thus destruction from Xerneas, Mega Rayquaza, and the Primals. Intimidate staving off Mega Ray and Primal Groudon as well as other staples like Mega Kangaskhan and Mega Salamence was incredible in gaining the upper hand with its own unrestricted Pokemon. This last second realization of how good Hitmontop was came at the best possible time, as Hitmontop users were rewarded for their great meta call and made it incredibly far. We've once again limited placements to top 3 before Worlds. Hitmontop's pre-Worlds placements were William Collins and Wolf Glick reaching 2nd and 3rd respectively at Florida, and Ure Nunes reaching 2nd at the Italian Nationals. Then at Worlds, it was all over top 8. Barris Akos reached 8th, Eduardo Cunha reached 4th, Marcus Statter reached 3rd, and Wolf Glick won, with the latter 2 players using the same team. Overall, Hitmontop had it rough until the absolute last second, then jumped on the biggest stage en route to glorious victory. Power creep struck again with Z moves, and Hitmontop was shunted further down the tiering totem pole, this time landing in NU. There, it was incredibly niche, as it only fit on select Staltine. Its role was countering Incineroar and Sneasel while spinning easily against the common Stealth Rock, Rhydon, and Steelix. Now it was a fine counter to the dark types, and it ate Rhydon and Steelix for breakfast. But its problem was that in countering the dark types, it was guaranteed to eat a knockoff, which was a move that they both spammed, and without leftovers, it was a lot worse at lasting throughout the game. This necessitated stall teams that could keep it alive with Wish, and this kind of support was incredibly specific, hence Hitmontop's lack of consistent use. It had its part in the metagame, but it was a small one. 2018 VGC saw Incineroar as king, and since it did Hitmontop's job except a million times better, not least because it wasn't weak to Fairy, Hitmontop's usage predictably dropped off a cliff. Top had a few tricks up its sleeve though. It was able to counter Incineroar itself very well, and it had access to a few nifty moves Incineroar didn't, such as Wide Guard, meaning it still formed a fierce duel alongside Volcarona and the ever-useful Helping Hand. There were a few who saw Hitmontop's potential and used it to success. It wasn't a bad Pokemon at all, but Incineroar was just so easy to slap onto any team. Its placements were Nicol Davide Cognetta reaching the quarterfinals at the Oceania Internationals, Juan Martinez reaching 6th at the Paraguay Open, Eric Porras reaching top 8 at the Costa Rica Open, Alessio Estrella reaching 7th at the Prague Special Event, Matthew Greaves winning the Salt Lake Regionals, Kirill Shashov reaching 6th at the Russian Nationals, a user named Repulse reaching 20th at the Japanese Nationals, and Andrew Norek who reached 69th at Worlds. Hitmontop's usage plummeted to nearly non-existent levels in 2019 with the restricted Pokemon allowed. It just wasn't worth trying to make work when Incineroar, scaler of every usage chart, existed. Hitmontop's minimal notable uses were in the Sun Series, Angel Miranda reaching 4th at the Portland Regionals, and Jonas Vegel reaching 12th at the Frankfurt Regionals. In the Moon Series, Jae Hyun Lee reached top 16, and Jeong Yeon Lee reached top 4 in the Korean League. Finally, in the Ultra Series, Heriberto Pocaye reached 2nd at Chile and top 8 at Bolivia, while Sergio Argandona also reached top 8 at Bolivia. Pedro Espinoza reached top 4 with it at Panama, and Jae Hyun Lee reached top 8 in the Korean League. It's been a long fall from grace for Hitmontop in VGC, but who knows, if it survives the final snap of Sword and Shield, maybe it'll be back with a vengeance. And that's it. So how good was Hitmontop actually? Well, it's never been a real OU Pokemon, save for a specific niche in Gen 4, but it's always had notable roles in the lower tiers, thanks to the plethora of useful utility it has, notably Intimidate and Rapid Spin. It was also a top VGC Pokemon in both Gen 4 and 5 before being hit by the fairy infestation of Generation 6 and 7. Also, you're welcome for not using a top pun until the very end. Anyway, overall, Hitmontop was as unique competitively as it was design wise, and its history shows that. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False White Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and in the comments I want to know, what do you think about competitive Hitmontop? How would you improve it to make it OU? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And to vote for next week's Pokemon, comment on the latest post in the community tab that should go up around the same time or a little bit after this video's release. And thank you so much to the patrons for voting for this Pokemon and for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.